How to plant a TBM cactus. We're standing here in front of a PENISCACTUS. We are on my cactus farm. My name's Dave. What's up? We're at my home and we are going to take a cutting of a TBM. That's abbreviated for Trichocereus burgessii monstrose, and we are going to plant the cutting and show you how to grow it. Try to keep it simple, fun, and entertaining. And this cactus here is obviously very, very old, and it does not flower. So in order to propagate this cactus, we take cuttings of it. And I'm gonna choose a cutting, probably like this one here, that's pretty jam-packed in, and it'll give this cactus a little room to grow. You can see it's had a lot of cuttings taken off of it, and I try to choose proper placement so that I don't just strip this sucker bare. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide in some scissors, since I can do that one-handed while taking a video. And we've cut that one pup section. And this cactus grows by simply producing new pups out of its spines. And what I've come to notice of the TBM, this is TBM-b, the short form, is see this new growth happening? So when a new pup emerges in that fashion, just a simple little lump, then you will get a new pup. But when it tends to split and break that section open, that usually means that the new pup is going to be larger than the pup it is emerging from. So let's go ahead and grab our cutting here. So this is like a standard size cutting. I do have these available in my shop, and this is about the size that they are. And let's cruise around and check out a couple things while we talk about this here cutting. It's totally fresh, and I clean that tool with rubbing alcohol before I cut it. And before we can just take this and stick it in the dirt, we need to callus it. And callusing is simply drying that wound, that fresh green wound. Just needs to dry so that it doesn't rot. Here we can see I have some cactus cuttings that I've taken, and these are hanging out and they're drying. And once they're dry enough, I will plant them. Those can be planted into the ground or into a pot. And planting in a pot is always nice because you can put it in the shade. Something that kind of instigated me making this video was some questions people had about how do I not sunburn my cactus? Well, here's an easy way. We'll set this down to dry, and we can put it on this metal rack here or on a plastic rack like that. That'll give it air circulation. And then we can put something simple like this fabric is over these so they don't sunburn, but they're out here kind of in the sun. Another simple way is to put them under some cardboard. So there's some ideas for you at home on how you can callus and dry your cactus. I do put a lot of my cactus indoors on racks to dry them. So once we have a cutting that's been calloused and dried like this one, and here's a great example of some sulfur put on the base, and we can just take a well-draining cactus mix, and I've put some decorative rocks on top. I like to use the top dressing, and make a small divot and stick that in there about an inch deep so it's steady, and boom, that will slowly root. And as it produces its roots, it may in fact pup on its own. We can see this one has just finished making its roots. This is a 6-inch pot. These are the rooted specimens that I do on my shop. And you can see that huge pup emerging from behind the spine. So like I said, a smaller pup is going to come out of the spine. We can see a few of these here emerging from out of the spine. And a larger, fatter pup, like that one there, is going to actually break the skin and come from behind the spine. Pretty cool. It's a fun, interesting little side notation. So once we have something like this that's rooted, you can see there's a 6-inch pot. This is that's the standard size that I work with. This is a 4-inch pot. I don't like them as much because they tend to put out a smaller new pup. They don't come out quite as big. But if we left it in there for 6 months or so, it would become rooted like a standard houseplant, and we can see all the roots on there. And we could dig a hole and we could plant that. Now, if we just dug a hole right here on this barren earth and planted that cactus, the chances are that it would become sunburnt. And that was one of the main questions that I had was, hey, how do you plant a cactus straight outside? And this instance was in Phoenix sun. I'm in Southern California, but this fellow was in Phoenix. And he wanted to plant his cactus just straight out into the sun. And of course, that would get horribly sunburnt. So one of the things that I do for planting new cuttings is I plant these seeds, castor bean seeds, which creates these plants. And that just gives a little bit of shade. You can see above us here, see these above us? It gives us a little bit of dappled shade. So that table of cuttings that we're looking at, it's underneath here. So we're getting a little bit of that dappled full sun in the morning and then shade in the mid-afternoon. And that just helps things from getting burnt. So these seeds get planted along these cactus when they're first being transplanted, and that provides them with a little bit of shade. Another cool tip that I have that I use quite often, we'll come over here and just grab one of these leaves. So after I freshly transplant something, I would take this leaf and I would put it right on top of that cactus. So say this guy came out of a pot, I'd put maybe 1 or 2 leaves right on top of that cactus. And it would stay like that for a few days until it dried out like that. And after a few days, it would be getting a little bit more sun. And after a little bit more time, this would crinkle and just kind of crunch off. And then after a bit of time and decomposing, the new pups would come out into the sun and it would be totally acclimated and used to being in that scenario. So that's kind of another cool trick of how we can plant things in the sun. And the fabric that I've showed you earlier, it's actually a plant material, a frost cloth, and this is breathable and it's very inexpensive, and obviously it rips easily and it's not necessarily a long-term solution, but a frost cloth or a row cover can be put over something to help it not get sunburnt. You know, of course there's shade cloth that would work great. So those are some cool, interesting ways. If I dug a hole and if I put this right here, it would burn. So another way is you can see all these succulents that I have. Ice plants, ioniums, some random weeds and the castors. And so these are kind of creating a nice little microclimate here. These are making it so that the sun doesn't just beat out the dirt until it goes completely dry. Like this exposed dirt right here is just dry and dusty and getting just weathered. Yet over here, underneath all of these succulents in this areas, we've got some killer moist soil that's staying a little bit more moist and wet because the sun isn't just baking straight to it. So another way of planting something and making sure that it doesn't just get burnt is if we dug a hole and we planted this guy right here, and after we planted it, we took a cutting of a succulent and we planted our succulent cutting right next to our guy there. And so now we're not getting just smashed by the sun. You know, this thing isn't going to get obliterated because it's just got a little bit of stuff around it. And I bet if you ask your friends, family, or neighbors, you could get a couple succulent cuttings for free. You know, walk around in your neighborhood and see an overgrown succulent garden. And with all of this here, you know, sometimes they get leggy, and just one out of the bunch, nothing's missed. And this can make a nice companion planting for some of your cacti, and they can keep the sun from just blasting out the dirt. And we can stick one of those guys in here, and that'll kind of help it out. You see, I didn't really plant that so well. And then I wanted to show off one other thing for growing your cactus in TBM, if you guys want to stick around for this little kind of tip. So when we were talking earlier, I noticed and saw this guy. So this area can be from sunburn. This is most likely from sunburn, but it can also be from damage of snails. So here we've got a snail causing some damage. And this damage, eventually, it'll kind of actually scrape off, and we'll see the green start coming back under there. But this snail is actually a bad guy, and we can see how clean and pretty all of these tippity tops are. And this snail can do a real amount of damage to our tips. I can tell this here is snail damage. And one of the giveaways is a shiny streak that those snails will leave. So we can see these tips here are just beautiful and perfect and untouched, and there's nothing wrong with them because this freaking snail hasn't eaten into them. But if we come over to this guy here, we can see a lot of these tips have those little white markings. And those little white markings are from snails. And those can be cosmetic damage, which isn't that big of a deal. But if the snails are left untouched and they just continue to eat, they can actually just put a hole into your cactus. So that's something we want to watch out for, is snails. And we can see this here was a castor trunk that was planted, and it provided that with shade. And one of the reasons I like using these big, huge castors is because, quite honestly, I can just cut them down and throw them away. You know, it's free seed, it's a free plant, and then I can just come in here and, you know, kill the thing and use this in my compost. I'll use it to build my trellis walkways, and it helps improve my soil. So that's one of the reasons that I really do enjoy and like using this castor. You can see here I planted a fresh unrooting cutting, and I went ahead and just popped in some seeds of the castor, and they sprouted up quick, and they're providing a little bit of shade. That guy did get a little sunburnt, but that castor is helping it from getting sunburnt now. And same with these here. These originally were growing under quite a bit of shade, and now that it's winter time, I've cut a lot of larger castors to let more sun through. And then once summertime comes again, I'll let some of them grow up and provide a little bit of dappled shade. So that's just kind of a cool tip. Like I said, that TBM there, it does not produce flowers, but it is one of my goals to get it to produce flowers. And we can tell when a cactus, especially a trichocereus, tricho means hair, and these buds here get so hairy, and they're just that telltale sign that these are going to bloom. And so when I come out here, I'm always hoping that rather than one of these pups, I see a big old fluffy hairball, and one of these guys is gonna bloom for me. Hasn't happened yet, and to be honest and frank, I haven't seen anyone else have one, but that's my goal. I'm out here trying for it. Well, cool. That's the nice little talk on trichocereus. We'll dabble and talk on the castor right now. So when I cut that stuff down, so here we can see some castor that I've planted from seed, and this is over some old cuttings that got taken off of a stand, and they're just providing some shade. Same with these here. These are all providing some shade. And here's a great example of leaves that I've placed on fresh cutting tips that have dried out and crunched up. Now, when I cut these suckers down, I use them. I use them to build my soil, and I use them to build my walkways. And we're gonna just try to climb through this madness. You can see there's a lot of this is just ready to get pruned, and I will need to prune it. Some of it will get removed. And we're getting down here to a fresher area. So we've hopped down here. And what this fresh area is made of, as you can see, it's primarily a lot of castor, some palm trimmings, and things that I add dirt onto. And now we can see these walkways and terraces that I've built. It's all decomposing matter. So I'm repurposing a lot of this castor. You can see that was a fresh cutting, and it's got the leaf sitting on top of it so it doesn't get burnt. So this fresh walkway here that's just built of old decomposing leaves and castor with dirt on top, I've let the weeds grow in, and this is a fresher area too. I've let all these weeds grow in because their roots are gonna hold that dirt. They're gonna make sure the rain doesn't wash it away. They're gonna make sure the sun doesn't blast out these fresh cuttings. And then once we get a little bit more growth on these fresh cuttings, then I can trim and cut the weeds. Now here's a great example. This here is a row of TBM, and they're smaller. It was small single node cuttings. And when I planted them, I made sure to put in all of this other material so they don't get burnt. And down here, we've got a nice long row of a bunch of TBM. These were in larger pots when I planted them. And the time of the year right now, springtime, the sun just isn't quite as strong. So it's a good time to plant for me. That's kind of a good note too, is, you know, how do you plant your cactus without getting sunburnt? Well, one of the ways you can do it is by not planting in the middle of July or August, by using the right time of year. So underneath all of these is an entire row hedge of TBM. Fat, healthy, and they're loving it. And they don't need to just get blasted by the sun. They can be hidden away here. And as they get a little bit bigger and more mature, then I can go ahead and prune this castor away from them. This is like a commercial for castor. And we can see here's some of the TBM really doing good. And when these were first planted as small singular segments, they were really getting blasted by the sun, and they've gotten quite a bit of growth on them. And I've actually been able to take some cuttings to be able to put those on my shop, which is super killer to be able to get cuttings off of things this young. Here's some cool ones. These came from UC Davis. And the guy that I got them from was my brother. Miss him, love him. Really happy about these. They look awesome. So you can see these are just thriving out here. Big, fat, thick, even though they're not getting absolute full sun. They're getting just dappled. A little bit of shade. And this even helps this guy here, is just having something next to it so it gets blocked for part of the day, and then at another part of the day it does get some nice full sun. And I've primarily used succulents. The ice plant does a great job of blocking out the weeds. Here's one example of one tiny weed in this huge vast section that would normally just get overwhelmed with weeds. And then another cool one is the geranium. I like the geranium just because it grows easily from cuttings. It shows off a pretty flower this time of year. We can see this awesome just burst of red. And it also wards off insects like gnats and mosquitoes, just kind of naturally. They don't like the scent and smell of this geranium. And this is all things that I can easily kill and rip out of here, just because, you know, they're not extremely valuable. I can pop this off and give the cactus behind it some sun, and I can also just take this sucker and put it into the ground right there, and that'll just give a little bit more color, and it'll block out that bit of shade, and it'll also help my hillside from eroding. Over here, I'm really stoked on these pups and these brevies. It can be hard to just chop the top off some really pretty cactus, you know, like this guy here was really a pretty cactus, but it was just a single cutting with a single tip, and I cut it, and now it's got 5 tips and 4 basil pups, so it'll come back. Same with this one. Beautiful variegated piece that I had to sell. You know, the cactus got to pay rent, but it's put out quite a bit of growth after that. So it can make a cactus more exciting to watch grow too. You know, when you cut the top off, it might be ugly for a little while. It might be discouraging, you know, this getting removed. But then, hey, we've got new bits of growth at the base, some at the tip. Keeps us going, keeps us interested. This is a cool one here. This is a Kawia that I was just really excited. I saw this small amount of variegation. You can see there's just a little bit of discoloration. This is a different color than the rest. I was hoping it'd really keep going, but it seems like it's kind of stopped. So that'll be a kind of a cool grafting project. This isn't necessarily a yellow variegated, but you know, having multiple colors of green can be a cool variegation project too. Variegation's always a sought after one, you know. I've put some grafts over here that I made that are variegated. That one there. This is a tip. It's a variegated PC on a PC rootstock. It's done pretty good. Check it out from this side. You know, sometimes variegation starts as just a light color and it takes a little while before it gets its yellow. I can see this one here with that marbling. It's gonna get cool coloration. It's just gonna take a little bit of time. There's so many things just tucked away in here. We talked about TBM and TBM propagation, and here's a cool example. This is a grafted piece. So this TBM, we really want it to pup here, and in order to do that, I'll need to cut and remove this pup off of its rootstock. Well, cool. I had fun hanging out, trying to share some tips and tricks on how to cut your TBM, how to plant your TBM, and how to not get it to sunburn in the full sun. And sometimes that just means don't plant it in the full sun. If you transplant into a pot, then you can move that pot around. And then once it gets established roots, ooh, my guy is flowering up here. Look at that. There's just always something fun to find, huh? Love that. So yeah, putting something out in the middle of this gravel area in a pot, it would burn. But if you tucked it away in a nice shady sheltered area over here, it might do really well. If anyone has any other cool tips on how to keep your TBM from getting burnt, pop them in the comments. And if anyone has any tips or tricks on growing TBM, getting them to pup, how you cut them, easy ways to dry, go ahead and pop that in the comments. And until next time, I'm going to go ahead and just try to put up a link. We'll see if I can do it or not, on how to grow cactus link, on how to make fertilizer for these TBM out of aloe vera. Cheap, easy way to do it. All right, cheers, guys. Everyone have a badass day. And hey, wish me luck on getting my TBM to flower. Can't wait to see some flower buds on there. Wouldn't that be cool? All right, cheers. See you guys soon.